The legal challenges to the president's emergency declaration have begun. More than a dozen states are suing the administration for trying to divert funds to build a wall along the U.S. Mexico border. California, along with 15 other states, says the president has, quote, a flagrant disregard for the separation of powers. The lawsuit also calls his decision to declare a national emergency, quote, unlawful and unconstitutional. All the states involved have Democratic attorneys general, and 15 of the 16 states have Democratic governors. Mr. Trump slammed the legal challenge on Twitter, saying it is mostly led by, quote, open border Democrats and the radical left. He also called out California, a state that has repeatedly challenged the president in court. Democrats say they will push a resolution to end the executive action, but the White House has signaled President Trump would veto that. This also comes as the Republican Party remains at odds over the national emergency declaration. So let's turn to Niall Stanage in Washington now. He's a White House columnist at The Hill. Niall, welcome. Thanks for being with us. Your colleagues at The Hill report that House Democrats are in no rush to push a resolution through, preferring instead to allow GOP divisions to fester. So how damaging could this rift be for the Republican Party, especially when you consider how critical they were of President Obama's use of executive authority?
It could definitely be a sizable problem in the Republican Party. If you think about it, the whole nature of conservatism is to think that traditions arise for useful reasons, that norms are obeyed for good reasons. President Trump here is talking about taking the kind of action that we really haven't seen before, taking it upon himself to declare a national emergency declaration in order to circumvent Congress about a matter of spending. Republicans clearly fear that a future Democratic president could use that same model to, for example, declare a national emergency over gun violence and circumscribe gun rights in some way. So there are genuine divisions here, and I think Democrats want to capitalize upon them.
Niall, a new poll shows that 60% of Americans disapprove of President Trump declaring a national emergency to build his wall, but 85% of Republicans support it. So is this an overall winning issue for the president when it comes to his re-election chances in 2020?
I don't think so, because the wall itself is unpopular, but this also goes to the heart of what the president's re-election strategy might be. We've seen him in office really cater to his base first, his base above all else. This is clearly an important issue for the base. There are people who elected Donald Trump purely on this issue, on the idea of building the wall. But more broadly, Tanya, I think it would be dangerous for the president were his base to see him as caving on this issue. So even though it might be tied up for a long time in the courts, it's better for him, to his base, to make a show of fighting than to back away.
And it's interesting because it looks like it might just work out in his favor. It seems that legal experts are cautioning that the state's lawsuits may not be successful, in part because the National Emergencies Act doesn't even define what a national emergency is. So if the legal battle is long, does that hinder the ability to focus on other parts of the president's agenda moving forward?
I'm not sure it does. I think there could be some compartmentalization here, where this issue is an important issue. It's one that the president talks about, but it is one that will go through the courts in some fashion. You're quite right to point out that there's enormous elasticity about what the definition of emergency is. But to your point, I don't think this court battle prevents or necessarily even distracts all that much from the pursuit of other things on the president's agenda. One could argue it poisons the well with Democrats, but that well, frankly, is pretty toxic as it is.
Indeed. Now, Niall, we did hear the president say that he predicted these lawsuits and that he'll win in the Supreme Court, quote, just like the travel ban. Should he be this confident with this challenge?
To be fair to him, he does have reasons for confidence. And of course, that goes to his own judicial appointments and to the two Supreme Court justices who have been appointed to the bench during his tenure. That does give an inbuilt conservative majority on the Supreme Court. The difficulty for President Trump, I think, will be likely verdicts from lower courts and the duration of this legal battle. It is in Democrats' interests and in the plaintiffs' interests to prolong this battle for as long as possible, so long as they can get an injunction to prevent the president building the wall immediately.
It does set an interesting precedent, though, if presidents start to just rely on the ability to declare a national emergency to push their reforms through. It will make for a different sort of government, that's for sure.
Very much so, and that's why so many members of Congress are sceptical of it. It's not on the Republican side that they're necessarily so sceptical of the policy. What they're worried about is their own powers being undercut, particularly the power of the purse, which of course is very important to lawmakers. And if presidents just have the capacity to create greater leeway for themselves in this fashion, that's not good for Congress. It takes more power to the executive branch, to the White House, rather than to Capitol Hill.
Absolutely. Well, Niall Stanage, thank you so much for your time.
Always a pleasure.